I always feel like we know too much about Prince Harry and not enough about Prince William. And that's why I was thrilled to read this book, William at 40, The Making of a Modern Monarch by Robert Jobson. Now, there's a particular moving part in this book that I just actually can't wait to share with you, because I think it really does give us a sort of a look into who William is. And I found it moving, and I felt like I sort of knew more about him once I'd read this bit. It's to do with the podcast that Prince William actually recorded during the pandemic. He was at Anmer Hall at Norfolk, which is, as you know, part of the Sandringham estate. Actually, Queen Victoria bought Anmer Hall and added it to the Sandringham estate. There's a bit of trivia for you. And so they were there for the pandemic, Princess Catherine and all the kids, and they were there. As you know, they did all Zoom calls for charity and everything, and they were fantastic. So he recorded this podcast for Apple for their Time for a Walk series, which is, you can access it if you have a subscription to the Apple Fitness app. This isn't a plug for Apple. I couldn't actually listen to it. I tried, because you've got to have that subscription. But luckily, Robert Jobson describes it beautifully in this book. I like the way Robert Jobson actually writes. I find him so easy to read, and he's just got sort of just the right amount of tiny little bits of snark sort of dabbled here and there. I really like him. So this podcast, I'm going to share my favourite bits with you, because it is really quite lovely. William shared with listeners a walk he'd used to take as a child at Christmas with his grandfather, Prince Philip, through the Sandringham estate towards Anmer Hall, now his Norfolk home. And then it says, sounds of feet on wet grass, unoiled gates and flying geese provided a perfect backdrop. And I could imagine that this would have been just wonderful during the pandemic, because, as you know, a lot of us couldn't even go out. Like, you were allowed half an hour of exercise a day or something, and you couldn't go with any other members of your household. And oh gosh, it just seems like another alien world, doesn't it? So anything like this, I would imagine, would be really welcome, particularly to someone stuck in a flat or something. So he describes this walk, and he describes, when I grew up, my father used to love his walking, and still to this day loves his walking. He used to try to force Harry and me out of the house, he says. And then he says, like all kids, he didn't appreciate that at the time. They didn't value what their father was trying to get them to do, which is sort of that's the anthem of childhood, isn't it? And it's not until you become an adult yourself that you realise that your parents often had a really good point when they were trying to get you to do something. But then he said he really, started to appreciate it, and now he has fully embraced the countryside and the love of walking, and everything that his father wanted him to be into, he is now firmly into. Now, Robert Jobson points out that in this very short podcast, it only went for 38 minutes or something, he shatters so many illusions about him. And one of the things that stood out for Robert Jobson was the fact that William started his day rocking to AC/DC, the Australian rock band, which, yay! And he used, his favourite track was Thunderstruck, which is really full on track. And Prince William described in this podcast that, on a Monday morning when he didn't feel like sort of going back to work, he'd had the weekend off, he would put that on really early in the morning, because it would get him out of bed, and he'd dance around while he's putting his clothes on and while he's going down to have breakfast with the kids and stuff, and it would really sort of get him going. And I just thought I could imagine that. I was sort of imagining Prince William a la Tom Cruise in Risky Business, with the white shirt and the doing the dance, and the slide with the socks. Oh, I am naughty. I'm a married woman. What am I doing thinking of that image? Okay. William's humour is evident. He describes how he had giggles many times. Oh, this is a gorgeous story. So he describes the fact of going to church with all the cousins, and I'm imagining, he doesn't say this, but I'm imagining Zara particularly, because I know they were very cheeky together. And evidently when they used to go into church at Sandringham for the Christmas Day service, the cousins would be across for them. So they would be in pews opposite each other. And William described the fact that he couldn't keep a straight face because the cousins would always be trying to make him laugh. And he would, let out a little giggle or, and the Queen would shoot him a look and he'd have to be good. But you could just imagine Zara doing that, couldn't you? I mean, you could just imagine that would be her mission for the day, to make William laugh inappropriately in the middle of the church service. And a particularly moving part was when William describes working for the East Anglian Air Ambulance Service. And I can tell that this moved Robert Jobson because he said it did. And he said that William was audibly close to tears, showing the real man that he is. When he said, and this is a quote from William from the podcast, "I felt like the whole world was dying. You just feel everyone's in pain, everyone's suffering." And Robert Jobson says, "You couldn't help but be moved by his courage and the fact that he revealed his inner fears and feelings. He is clearly a man of honesty and inner power." And yes, I mean, if I was in trouble, I think I would want someone like Prince William to fly in as the ambulance officer to, rescue me. I think he would have a very calming, strong presence, as I'm sure all the people he worked with do as well. I mean, people like that are true heroes in my eyes. "The sound of the wildlife is so crucial for a walk, and I love the peace. But I'd much rather hear the songbirds than peace." This is William. "You've got to look out for the little guys," he said. That broke my heart a little bit. I thought about him looking out for Harry. So he also talks about going off to boarding school and how they used to play "You're Simply the Best" in the car with Diana and her protection officer, and they'd sing it at the top of their voices because it used to settle their nerves going off to boarding school, because, all kids are nervous when they're going back to boarding school after holidays. It's always a big moment, isn't it? So in conclusion, when he gets back after the end of the walk, William mentions Catherine. And he says, and this is a quote from the podcast, "It's been really nice to get out and have a walk. I feel like I've shared a lot of feelings. Feels like I've been on a walk with my best mate or my wife." Oh, so lovely. And then Robert Jobson sort of wraps it up, and this is right near the end of the book, and he uses this as his conclusion. And he says about William, "His tone and demeanour leave us all with a sense that this is a man who has grown into his role." And Robert Jobson very cleverly does show that journey throughout the book. He really does lay it out. "He is a listener and believes listening is one of humanity's greatest tools. One of our greatest assets is to understand each other." And this is a very moving paragraph, and I think it is very sincere. "One is left in no doubt that when the moment in history comes, William will meet the challenge and rise to it. Our 1,000-year-old monarchy is safe in his hands." So, yes, beautiful ending, happy ending, and I can just tell Robert Jobson really does admire William, and I just really enjoyed reading this book. I thought it was just fascinating, really. But it's William at 40, The Making of a Modern Monarch. And I will see you all again very soon. Bye.